Started 20 years ago, and we've done things as an annual conference over the years to help raise a scholarship about a decade ago, to help build an entryway at the university about 18 years ago. And then throughout the years, our apportionments, some of the dollars that we send to the general church goes to support the work of Africa University. But Bishop Matthews had a vision of doing something for our new conference as it kind of came together, something that would kind of unify us, something we could all work together on, and his vision was to establish 8 permanent scholarships for Africa University, the cost being about $1 million, in order to have an endowment fund that would have interest each year to be able to make sure that those students could go to school. And so 2 years ago, we voted on it at annual conference and said, yes, over the next 3 years, we'll raise $1 million. Well, I'm here today to tell you we've raised the first eighth of that, okay? We've raised about $125,000 in hand, and so the first scholarship will be awarded this year. We've got the next $125,000 already in pledges. Some people pledged a 3-year campaign, and those dollars have been coming in pretty steadily. But we are far from the mark of $1 million, and we're 2/3 of the way into the campaign. And Bishop Matthews is no longer our bishop. And so when Bishop Webb came, he asked us really to look at what are you going to do to jumpstart, to try to finish up this campaign in your final year. Couple of the pastors, one retired, one active in the Albany area, shared that in the Troy conference that they had been a part of, there was a retired man who would walk to conference every year raising money for Africa University. And one of the retired pastors said, well, then I've been biking, I think for like the last 15 years, to conference every year, raising a little bit of funds. And so they began to talk with others, saying who else might want to come along. And as of today, best of my knowledge, there's 6 of us that are doing it this year. There's one of my colleagues down in Bath, New York, so south of me in Penyon, is riding his bike to conference. There's one in Olean, New York, riding his bike all the way up to conference. One from Rome, New York, coming in, and 2 from Albany. I'm the only one that's walking, okay? But I don't like bike seats. So, my feet work, my seat doesn't work so well. So I decided I would walk to annual conference. And as I began to think about how I would do that, looked at the map, tried to mark out how you get there from here and where I might go, I was blessed to find you right about in the middle. And thinking, okay, I'm going to stop in Auburn. And then backtracked and forward to figure out where I might go. So as soon as I leave here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and start walking on towards Syracuse, I'm going to stop in Elbridge where Dana Harrell is the pastor. And Dana's going to meet me and walk for a little bit with me. And then I'll share a program there. Getting on into Camillus and then on into Syracuse by Thursday morning at 9:30 when conference begins. So I'd ask you first for my bikers today. I was pleased I could hold an umbrella. I don't know how you bike and hold an umbrella. I'm guessing they got wet today because they had to be on the road in the midst of the rain. But I'm doing well. My father was a mail carrier, and so I thought about my dad a lot. With Memorial Day weekend, he was in World War II, and I enjoyed walking. I remember walking with my dad on his mail route when I was a little boy. And so it's been a joy for me to walk. I shared with some people, I have come by places that I've driven by. I mean, I've driven this route for the last umpteen years. I've never stopped at the Memorial Day Museum in Waterloo. I've never really stopped at the Women's Rights National Park. Today I stopped at that little antique place, out here along. I've driven by that many times, never stopped. It was dry in there today, okay? I had incentive to stop. But I couldn't buy anything because then I had to carry it with me. But I looked. And so, it's been a joy for me to have an opportunity to do a little holy walking. For me, it's also reflective of a couple of things. As we come into annual conference, it has not been all that many generations ago. Nobody drove to conference. A lot of the old circuit riders might have rode their horse to conference. And a number of them probably walked if they didn't have a horse. Same way in Africa. There are people who gather for church or they gather for annual conference because they have no other way of getting there. They walk, and literally for miles. This spring I heard a story out of Africa University of a young man who got his letter of acceptance. He had a scholarship, he was going to be able to go to school, and he walked from his home country to Africa University because he had no other way of getting there. Caused me to think. I remember going off to Penn State as a young boy. My parents took me. I remember my daughters when they went off to school. I took them. I mean, we had to get a U-Haul behind the car to get everything they wanted in their room, you know. Here's this guy, gets the letter from Africa University, and he just starts walking. And he gets to the border. And of course, to get into Zimbabwe, they had to call the school and make sure he really did have, position. The school had already started. He was so far behind because he was so slow in terms of walking that great distance. But they said, yes, we have accepted him as a student. Yes, he can come into the country. They let him in. They said, keep him right there. We're going to send a car. He wouldn't even wait for the car. He kept right on walking into Zimbabwe, into the school. But that shows me the power of an education and what a difference it can make. Maybe not just for the individual student, but for the family or even the community, or the communities where they might go, or over time, maybe even for all of the countries that will be, led by some of the students that have come through the school. So with all that in mind, I said, yes, I want to walk. And I want to be able to tell the story. And again, Memorial Day weekend was not maybe the best weekend to begin, but I had to. So when I got to Geneva, they couldn't pull together anybody. So I didn't talk anyone on Sunday night. But Monday I stopped in Waterloo. There was a little Bible study group that was meeting, and so I shared with them. And then last night at Seneca Falls, had an opportunity tonight with you, tomorrow at Elbridge. And so I just keep telling the story. And so that's what each of us is supposed to do. Africa University, as I understand, the acacia tree was used for their logo because out in the bush, the teachers would gather under a tree, under the shade of a tree, and there teach the student. And I've understood it to be a sunrise, to rising on a new day, if you will. Many of us go to school in the morning, but maybe it's that sense of a new day for the graduates and those who go on out into the world. But I've enjoyed the opportunity to share and wear my shirt and encourage people and tell the story. Let's take a look first at a couple of maps, if we could. All right, I'll tell Noah's story. All right. Thank you, Barb. All right. But I know many of us have some mind set of where we are. Now, this is a flat projection map. It's not accurate in terms of size. I mean, Antarctica is not that big, but if you flatten a map and kind of filled in all the open spaces, it looks that way. Same with Greenland. It looks like bigger than the United States. It really isn't. It kind of comes to a point out in the north. But as you look at Africa, first thing I want you to see is that huge Sahara Desert. Okay? What Africa University chose to do was to be set south of the Sahara to educate people who are in the southern part of Africa. In the north, there were universities, particularly in Egypt, but in the south, other than South Africa, at the time of apartheid, the real strong separation between the church and the government of South Africa. So where can we put an African university south of the Sahara? Next slide, please. To get an idea of how big Africa is, somebody overlapped a map of several countries that would kind of take up part of it. It's not the whole world. You don't see Canada there. You don't see South America. But, it is a lot larger than the United States. And particularly on the right, if you look at that second map down, we sometimes think that we live in a big area of the United States, but Africa is huge. And when you're walking by foot, that's a long ways to walk sometimes. Let's take a look at the next one. I want to show you where Zimbabwe is. Okay? Here's where I need my pointer. Let me get a little pointer stick, unless you can find it. You can't even see it there. Hey. All right, let's see. You see the little arrow? I'm in the ocean.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Is it right there?
Yeah.
Is it?
It's a little tiny country that when you and I were in school was not called Zimbabwe, it was called Rhodesia. Right? Named after Cecil Rhodes. Okay, it was a British colony. But after 1979, it gained independence and became known as Zimbabwe. Okay, in the southern part of Africa. North of South Africa, kind of inland from Mozambique. Okay. How about the next slide? And this is just a map of Zimbabwe. And where we are is in the middle right, a place called Mutare. The United Methodist Church and its predecessors have been there for over 100 years. Old Mutare is where we had a mission school, a mission church, and a mission hospital. And so it was a logical place as to where to put this university in Mutare. All right, let's see if we can find the next one. Yeah. All right, this kind of gives you more information you probably want to know, but things I should highlight. It was designed to be Pan-African by design. That was, they didn't want to just have a university for only the students in Zimbabwe, but for any tribe, any nation, and really had worked hard in terms of developing a university where people could come together in peace, because a lot of these countries, a lot of these tribes had been at war for a long time. And they've been blessed to discover through their Peace Institute initiatives, people who had grown up in countries and in tribes that had hated one another are now roommates. You know, they're classmates, they're working together, and it's been just a blessing. Let's see, they have 75 full-time lecturers, they have some part-time, they have visiting lecturers. There's some of us from the United States who have been blessed to go over and to share as faculty or visiting faculty members. Let's see what else we got in there. I can't remember what's on the slide. All right, if I have to click it again. See anything else? All right. I was at General Conference in 1988. I was a young pastor at the time. I was ordained in 1985. But that year, as they gathered in St. Louis, Missouri, they did a couple of things. One, I remember they approved the hymnal, which you now have in the pew rack. And they also approved developing a university in Africa. Next one should give us a little more info. They opened 4 years later for classes in 1992, so this year they celebrated 20 years of school. Again, it was a former British colony, and so they're using a British model of higher education. And so whereas we have universities that have colleges, they have universities that have faculties. And so you have to be approved by the faculty, whichever you're going to learn, and kind of go through the headmaster, if you will, of that particular faculty. Next one. As we began to develop Africa University, it was important and incumbent upon us to kind of pay as we go. And so no buildings were built with 30-year mortgages. A part of that had to do with what the problem in Zimbabwe has been horrible inflation. Now, I know we've had some years when we thought inflation was just horrible, you know, and some of the problems that we maybe have had back a few decades ago. But when the inflation is like 2,000%, I mean, thinking about how do you build and how do you maintain the economy, it was a pay as you go. So conferences here, individuals here, families here, or people around the world have put buildings on Africa University on their plan as a pay-as-you-go plan. And what else do we have? Okay, yeah, let's take the next one. What's the importance of that education? Again, it was that sense of everyone is welcome, and so they try to get a very diverse population, and I think we'll see that in a moment. But it was a sense that I think brought this to fruition in 1988, that they'd experienced what they called a brain drain in Southern Africa. The students from Southern Africa who could go on for a higher education often went to England, okay, went to London, or they'd come to the United States, and then they'd stay in London, or they'd stay in the United States. They wouldn't go back home after they'd gotten their education. And so this way, having the school in Africa, you know, helping people to relate to one another, but to stay in Africa. All right, and so what are they doing these days? I think some of the faculties are making a difference with what they're instructing the students. First school that was established was agriculture, which helps me to remember my alma mater was Penn State, primarily set up as a land-grant school in Pennsylvania to teach the farmers in central Pennsylvania. I mean, Cornell, think about agriculture. Health sciences, knowing that there were a number of diseases and a number of villages having no medical personnel. How could we help? Well, Africa University said health sciences would be the second thing they did. Third, they came out and said we need to work on theology, helping to train the pastors and the lay people in terms of what we believe. And then they've got other schools that they looked at, education, teaching the teachers that would go back to the villages, things with humanities or social sciences, how do we care for one another. And then finally the Institute of Peace and Leadership, which really has helped with some of those tribal conflicts and experiences that they've had in the various countries. And one of the hopes, one of the goals has been to teach people how to, have some administrative skills, leadership skills, in the anticipation that some will be involved in their governments and communities or even nationally and making a huge impact on the sub-Saharan Africa. So what is it doing these days? Since 1992, and those first 40 students who graduated in 1996, they've had 4,000 graduates. And the number is increasing each year as the school has been growing. They developed something to work with a number of the families, there were orphans, children orphans of war or orphans of diseases. And so they're working on a little program, and I don't know where Fairfield got the name, but working with agriculture, looking at how to develop nutritious and sustainable crops. I tried to get on the internet here, but it's very intermittent and it wouldn't let me get there. The pictures that I have are from the Africa University website, and it shows some of the crops that they're growing and some of the people out in the fields. You'll have to go there on your own, africau.edu. They also do some things with microeconomy. I mean, there's that sense of the micro loans that will allow people to start a little startup business, maybe a 1 or 2 person business. And so they're working with the students, looking at how to develop that for women, for farmers, for those who might want to. Now what do we get? I don't know. Now we'll work offline.
Work offline?
Sure. Thank you. All right, next slide. Again, in the health area, there have been a few basic things that they've done. What initiatives they got? Let's see. People with HIV and AIDS has been huge in Africa, and so the medical faculty has been working on some of that. Also issues with nutrition, anti-malaria. A number of us have talked about nets over the years, nothing but nets or imagine no malaria, and getting people to sleep under the nets. AU's developed blankets kind of saturated with some kind of anti-malarial mosquito repellents. They've also done things through their School of Theology about church growth and church development in Africa, and whereas our conference, our church in Upper New York is declining, the church in Africa is growing, they're developing new congregations, working again in conflict probably not just between tribes, sometimes there's conflict in the church. Alright, so again, how do we do peace? How do we do leadership? How do we do administration or governance? It's part of what they've been teaching. And working together. Again, with the newest country in South Africa, one of the people I'll meet when I get up to an annual conference, one of my colleagues is Brad Hunt up in North Syracuse. He's been working strongly with the folks in South Sudan, the lost boys of the Sudan, if you know their story. Well, they finally have developed a new country, so the Institute of Peace has really been working with them to how to come after this civil war, how to come after this time of conflict to begin to become a new country. And so where's it going? Enrollment is up. Again, they started with 40 students back in 1992. Last year, 1,634 students. I don't know where they'll be this fall when they start. 23 countries, okay, the student population from all over. And about half is female. There we go, which is big in Africa.
Do that again.
Again, the cultures that some of us come out of,
All right, nice.
that was unknown. All right, so what are we doing about it? Well, again, as we've come to be a new conference, we've talked about how we're going to be good global neighbors and help others, and then with the Bishop's Initiative to look at what we might do here for Africa University. And so, what do they need? Our support, yes. So I'm out here asking for your money. Thank you. But I'm going to ask for more than that. I'm going to ask for your prayers. Let's take a look at the money. You know, all four of our conferences, the Troy, the Wyoming, the Western, North Central, had done some things prior to our coming together for scholarships for Africa University. And again, it was established here in 2011, just 2 years ago when we met for our annual conference. Oh, should I ask a question? Don't push any more buttons. Let's hope it stops right there. Do you have some idea how much it costs to go to college these days? Okay, these are old statistics. This is 2011, 2012 numbers. But you know, here's what we had back then. If you wanted to go to a 2-year school, stay at home with mom and dad, no room and board, okay, some colleges you could get by with about $3,000 a year for your, you know, school and books. Okay, just get your tuition and, you know, in and out. If you were going to stay in-state for a 4-year school with room and board, whether that's in a dormitory or an apartment, on average, you're probably somewhere around $70,000. I think that may be a little higher by today. But some of you have paid for college for your kids, or you know what they're experiencing. Again, if you go to one of those 4-year schools out of state, if you don't go to the one that's in-state, you got to pay out-of-state tuition. That jacks the number. And of course, there are those private schools, and those can go through the roof, depending on which private school you might want to go to. You know, $40,000, $50,000 a year is not unknown. Well, Africa University, $5,400 a year with room, board, tuition, books, everything is the cost per student.
Send your kids there.
But again, when you think about Africa, that's an astronomical number in their economy, you know, and most people cannot afford it. The only way they can get to school is by having a scholarship. So how much money does it take in order to get that kind of scholarship? Well, the calculated number out of the development office is $125,000 well invested, no matter what the market does, what the interest rate might be, will generate that. So our goal is to raise $1 million to provide for 8 scholarships. Let's see the next slide. And